I'm a long-term friend of Juliet Bryant, and she actually endured her abuse in silence for many years, almost 2 decades, until Epstein was finally arrested in 2019. Only then she told me about her story. And because her story is so unique compared to other survivors, I knew that this had to come out. It's a completely different story. It turns the whole Epstein sex trafficking on its head, basically. I think you know Juliet's story, but for your viewers who don't, her story is unique in that she was trafficked to New Mexico in 2004 on her final trip with Epstein. And on that trip, she woke up naked in a laboratory with a female doctor operating on her without her knowledge and without her consent. So Blue Butterfly explores the very real possibility that Epstein was trafficking these girls for medical crimes, not for sex trafficking.
All right, just for the purpose of YouTube, we're going to say transporting them. Otherwise, if we say that other word too many times,
Sure.
then YouTube suppresses the video. So you said that there were certain elements of Juliet's story that made it stand out from other survivors.
Yes.
You've touched on it a bit there. What other elements were there?
Well, she also believes that the abuse that she suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, the sexual abuse, was not as severe to cause the awful circumstances she had when she returned from Zorro Ranch. When she got back to Cape Town in July 2004, her mental state collapsed. She had severe panic attacks. She was hospitalized up to 10 times. The doctors didn't know what was wrong with her. She was put on tranquilizers. They thought, because she couldn't breathe, they thought that she may have something like asthma. They gave her asthma pumps. That made it worse. She said her state was so bad she couldn't leave the house for a year. And that all happened after her trip to New Mexico. She says herself that the sexual abuse that happened on the other trips could not have caused that severe reaction. So she believes that Epstein was doing something else. In addition to the unauthorized medical procedure, he could have very much been doing some sort of MK Ultra type mind control on the girls. Now remember, Epstein worked for the CIA. The CIA performed all these procedures under the MK Ultra banner. I think there were around 150 different sub-projects. And Juliet actually pointed me in that direction. So before she was well enough to speak about her experiences with Epstein, I did a lot of research into the real possibility that he could have been performing some type of MK Ultra mind control experiments on the girls.
So for viewers who are not familiar with MK Ultra, then what is your understanding of MK Ultra?
My understanding, well, if your viewers want to do their own research, they can go to cia.gov and they can have a look at all the different sub-projects and the awful experiments and procedures that the CIA performed on unwitting American population. They also apparently used vast quantities of LSD. So this spread through universities, prisons, research centers, etc. And they did all different types of experiments, like electric shock therapy. Apparently, one woman who went in saying she suffered from depression, they used so much electric shock therapy that she couldn't recognize her own family when they came to visit her. And they were basically trying to work out what they could do with the mind. There was one procedure that actually stood out in my mind because it used two 19-year-old girls. And they were able to program them to detonate a simulated bomb through a code word over the telephone. And what's interesting, yes, I believe that young girls could be more programmable than other demographics. And I believe that when Juliet returned to Cape Town, she made the point of saying Epstein used to call her every few days. Now, it could be that he was reinforcing any type of programming that had been instilled in her. When you look at the Epstein scandal, what is interesting is that the girls were going back. So Juliet did 3 separate trips with Epstein, and then he would send her back to Cape Town and to her family. And a lot of people do not understand why she got back on a plane and went back to Epstein. I do devote an entire chapter in Blue Butterfly to that, which shows how he controlled the girls with empty promises, with threats. And she also said he was the sort of man you could not say no to. She believes that now she would have reacted in a very different way. But back then she felt her only reason was she had to comply, basically. She had to go back and do what he wanted. And this could be partly due to some type of mind control procedure. He really manipulated and controlled these girls. Journalist Vicky Ward, who interviewed Epstein in 2002 and eventually produced a profile of him for Vanity Fair in 2003, said he was so manipulative. It was hard to understand how manipulative he was unless you were there. Obviously, journalist Vicky Ward picked up on the Farmer sisters' allegations, Maria and Annie Farmer's allegations, and she was not able to include them in her Vanity Fair profile. So she was profiling Epstein at the exact time that Juliet was being trafficked. And Juliet could notice how Epstein became increasingly irritable and uncomfortable because he knew that these allegations had come forward. To Juliet, he said, "These women have it in for me. They've made up these lies about me, etc." But those allegations were eventually axed from Vicky Ward's profile called The Talented Mr. Epstein. And I think the reason why is Epstein intimidated the then editor Graydon Carter. There was a severed cat's head found in a garden and a bullet on a doorstep. And I think even Epstein's close associate, Bill Clinton, paid him a visit. And therefore, those allegations were cut out of that 2003 Vanity Fair profile. And if it had gone forward, perhaps, other girls would not have been targeted.
You've done some great research, Sarah. This is absolutely fascinating. So, do you think when Jeffrey was transporting these girls, the girls he looked for, he picked them because they had certain characteristics that he could manipulate, brainwash, MK Ultra? And would you say that, when Juliet fell into this web, there was a period where Jeffrey was analyzing her psychology to, see what he could take advantage of?
Yes. Well, you probably know the story of how Juliet was recruited in Cape Town. So on the
let's repeat that then for the viewers.
Sure, I'll just go briefly over that. On the 26th of September 2002, Epstein flew into Cape Town with a high-profile entourage that included Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker. That night, Juliet was out having a couple of drinks with some friends in a bar, and she was approached by a very tall, stunning American model who said, "I'm here with the King of America. There's a billionaire. He's connected to Victoria's Secret, and he can launch your modeling career internationally. Would you like to meet him?" So Juliet went along with another model friend of hers and this girl to go and meet Epstein that very same evening. They were dining at a restaurant called Beluga. When the girls walked in, they were all mid-meal, but they made a point of standing up and shaking their hands. She said when she met Bill Clinton, he held onto her hand for a long time while he was talking to another person at the table, and that made her feel uncomfortable. But they only met for about 10 minutes at that stage, and she was invited to go back to the Cape Grace Hotel where they were staying with her modeling portfolio the next day. And Epstein seemed interested in her. He wanted to see her modeling portfolio. Before he viewed that, she was invited to go and see Bill Clinton say his speech. He was traveling, talking about HIV/AIDS and improving economic development on the continent. She said the speech was pretty cookie cutter. She wasn't that interested in that. She was rather watching Kevin Spacey, what he was doing. When they got back to the hotel, Epstein had gone so far as to set up a fake casting for her. There were 3 girls that were working for Epstein that Juliet later identified that were sitting in the presidential suite pretending to be Karen model agents. They all looked at her book and made comments on her pictures. While she was sitting there, Bill Clinton walked through the living area and acknowledged them, which also gave Epstein a lot of creditworthiness. When they looked at her book, they then sent her through to a separate room where she met with Epstein. And it was at that stage that Epstein started asking her questions. And in hindsight, the questions were definitely profiling her. What was the relationship like with her father? What was her financial situation like? Did she have any sisters? And did she have a boyfriend? So Juliet just thought that he was being friendly and nice, etc. But in retrospect, he was profiling her to find out whether she would be ideal to take over to the States. It took only about 2 weeks for him to get her a model visa. And about 3 weeks later, she was in the United States. She had been taken to New York.
So what you're saying then, Sarah, is there wasn't like a period of Jeffrey getting to know Juliet and trying to find out how he could take advantage of her. From the get-go, he had her screened.
Yes.
To find vulnerabilities.
Exactly.
That's like, so calculating.
Yeah. I've spoken to other Epstein survivors. For some reason, Shaun, I have 3 close friends who were all on those flight logs. And I've spoken to 5 different survivors in total. Some of them were groomed for a long time. They have different experiences. So because Epstein was only in Cape Town for that one evening and he had a short time to profile Juliet, he didn't groom her. Another survivor I've spoken to was groomed, taken out and bought presents and he was really lovely to her. Juliet never had that because when she arrived in New York, she was picked up by a town car with a driver. She was taken to the block, which is 301 East 66th Street, the block that was central to his transportation operations, and put in her own apartment there. She wasn't there for very long when the phone rang, and it was either Sarah Kellen or Leslie Groff, his 2 co-conspirators. One of the girls called to say, we are going to the Caribbean, pack a bag for the Caribbean. And she wasn't prepared for that. She thought she was just going to be staying in New York modeling. So she had to pack what she had to go to the Caribbean, shower quickly, and the same town car came to pick her up and take her to Teterboro Airport, and apparently drove straight onto the runway to this private jet. And she didn't know what was happening. She had been traveling for 24 hours at that time. She was so excited she couldn't sleep on the plane. She had never left South Africa before. It was her first time traveling internationally on her own. She was exhausted. She entered the private jet, and Epstein was sitting there watching her, and he patted the seat next to her, and she was strapped in for 3 hours on that flight to the island, and that's when the abuse started immediately.
Wow. All right, we've got almost 1,000 watching live, and I'm here with Sarah McCarthy. I'm going to put Sarah's book link in the live chat if you want to get that for pre-order. I mean, Sarah is meticulous at telling this story, absolutely fascinating. But there's a hell of a lot more detail in the book, as you can imagine. We've only got an hour today. I'm going to try and get Sarah back when the book is actually released. So, you know, a lot has been said about Prince Andrew and Jeffrey. And we've actually got Andrew Loney coming back on at 7:30 p.m. UK tonight live with Lauren viewers, so tune in for that one. And not much has been said about Bill Clinton and Jeffrey. It's almost as if like they've used Prince Andrew to keep the heat off Bill Clinton. But what it sounds to me from what you're saying is that, you know, there was a guy in this country called Jimmy Savile who I wrote a book about, and he did a lot for charity. He flew all over the world, had a papal knighthood. The Queen knighted him.
I mentioned him in my book.
He used good deeds and raising money for hospitals in particular here. He raised tens of millions. He used it as a cloak to get away with his evil deeds. And what it sounds to me, you know, Jeffrey's flying around the world with Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton's able to say, oh, I was in Africa, you know, helping the poor people of Africa, whatever he's doing. But behind the scenes, that is perhaps a disguise.
Yes.
For what for the other, the transportation of the girls and the other evil deeds that are going on. Would you say? I guess we can only allege it because Bill Clinton doesn't have a conviction. Would you allege then that Bill Clinton was either participating in the evil deeds or was aware of the evil deeds?
Yes, I would think that he was. Although Virginia Giuffre, bless her soul, was trafficked to a lot of different men. She was never trafficked to Bill Clinton. It's very clear that Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton were inextricably linked. I've drawn some parallels that other journalists have not picked up. I can speak to that if you want, Shaun.
Oh, yes, please. Let's say transported as well.
Right. Actually, where I am at the moment in Charleston, I wrote a chapter called Obeah, which means a bad omen, in local dialect in the US Virgin Islands. So I wrote about Jeffrey Epstein's private island. What no one else has picked up is that Bill Clinton decided to have his winter holiday in both January 1997 and January 1998 on the island of St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands. 4 months later, in April 1998, Epstein then purchased his private island and called it Little St. James. Now, there must be some type of connection there. Why would he suddenly buy the island when his good friend Bill Clinton was holidaying there? You know, a lot of the press has sort of downplayed the association between Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton, but there's a photograph of the two of them in the White House in 1993. And White House visitor logs uncovered by the Daily Mail show that Epstein visited the West Wing in particular 17 times after Bill Clinton was inaugurated. Another thing that I've picked up, which no one else has commented on, is that 3 days before leaving the White House, Bill Clinton assigned a monument designation in the US Virgin Islands off an island called St. John, which meant that the subterranean lands there would not be able to be used by fishermen. They would be protected. And was he really interested in conservation, or was there a deeper, darker reason for this monument designation? My American correspondent said that a lot of presidents tend to do this just before leaving the White House so that they don't get questioned over their decisions. So these are a lot of parallels that beg deeper questions.
And, you know, what we find out, what's documented, is usually only the tip of the iceberg, because when we interviewed Paul Page, Prince Andrew's royal protection officer. He said Prince Andrew was bringing Maxwell into the palace off the books and had special access. And isn't there a theory that Maxwell and Epstein had special access to the White House through a back door or something? And, you know, perhaps there could have been much more going on.
I think to the White House, yes, they were visiting the White House. I think Epstein's visits in particular, he was met by Mark Middleton. Mark Middleton, as I'm sure you know, Shaun, met a very untimely death. He was suicided in Arkansas. I think he was found hanging by an electrical cord from a tree, which draws parallels with Epstein's own death. He also had a shotgun blast in his chest, and the shotgun was thrown off the top of my head 30 yards away from him. But still, it was ruled a suicide. And this is the man that showed Epstein into the White House to visit with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's schedule showed that he was not always there at that time. What they were discussing is unsure, but I think Whitney Webb said it could have been to do with moving the CIA-linked airline, Southern Air Transport, to Ohio Rickenbacker Airport at that time. It could be why he was there.
Yeah, and if the people are not familiar, Southern Air Transport was one of the CIA airlines that transported the white kilos of the white stuff into America, and then the weapons down into South America.
Well, what's interesting around that specifically is that Juliet believes that Epstein could have been involved in some form of smuggling. So when you look at his Boeing 727, it had a rear hatch that opened mid-flight, so things could be dropped out of, you know, if they flew really low, they could drop something out. That draws parallels with those planes. I think they were nicknamed, those cargo planes were retrofitted with rear hatches to drop the white powder, as you said, out. So there are parallels there. Epstein was moving every 3 days. I think a 2002, one of the first profiles ever written about Epstein was Thomas Landon Jr., wrote a profile for New York Magazine. And in that, he said that his planes were logging about 600 hours a year. And Epstein was moving every 3 days. So why was he moving that much? Juliet said he always used to say he wanted to chase the sun. But the venues that he lived in, so specifically West Palm Beach and the Caribbean, the sun was pretty much always shining. So why was he moving around so much? What was he doing? I actually uncovered another article written by Vicky Ward, and that one was for Rolling Stone, where she alluded to the fact that he could have been smuggling. He also told another journalist, Edward J. Epstein, no relation, that he knew the owner of a deep water port in Djibouti so well that he practically ran it. When you look at Djibouti, about 30% of all the ships go through the Suez Canal. So it's a key sort of operational or smuggling route. And Jeffrey Epstein also told people that he was making a fortune out of guns and diamonds, moving them. So he could have been moving them as well. Juliet makes a very valid point. When you're that rich, why would you travel that much? It's time consuming. It's expensive. It's boring. So why was he traveling that much all the time?
Which confirms what Ari Ben-Menashe told us about Jeffrey being part of the Robert Maxwell spy weapons transportation network, Iran-Contra, etc. All ties completely into this.
Yes.
So have you looked at the flight logs with Bill Clinton and seen the names of the other passengers?
So Bill Clinton was on the flight logs, from what I understand, 26 times. He took four tours with Epstein. 2 were to Africa. One was the 2002 tour where Juliet was recruited. Another one was to Asia and another one to Europe. He went to far-flung places such as Russia, Bangkok, with Epstein. So a lot of people are pointing fingers at Trump, but Trump traveled from what I understand, just from West Palm Beach to New York, where he had properties. He didn't do the same tours that Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton was traveled with 8 Secret Service personnel once, and that was on the 13th of July 2002, off the top of my head. In that instance, this also ties into the smuggling. I uncovered another link between an unusual event in Morocco where Moroccan forces took over a small island, just basically a rock, in the Straits of Gibraltar. It's about 200 meters off the coastal beaches of Tangier. So I think this happened on the Thursday, the 11th of July, 2002. Moroccan forces invaded this island, which was actually owned by Spain. So therefore, it was the first invasion on Western soil, NATO soil, since World War II, and it provoked Spain. But at the same time, these Moroccan forces took over this tiny island, which had no economic value. It was just basically a rock. King Mohammed was celebrating his nuptials with a 3-day affair in the capital, Rabat. And Clinton and his 8 Secret Service men, as well as Doug Band, his right-hand man, were at those nuptials. Now, what is happening on this island, and why did Jeffrey Epstein then fly in from Nice, France, on the 13th of July, while this rock was under Moroccan siege, and pick up Bill Clinton in? So Jeffrey Epstein first flew into Tangier, right where this was happening, and then into Rabat and picked up Clinton before flying him back to the States via the Portuguese archipelago of the Azores. I find it all rather fascinating because the press haven't picked up on this either. And that island, the only strategic value it could have is that it sits in the Straits of Gibraltar, which is a key smuggling route between North Africa and Europe. So this is just another thing that I've picked up and written in Blue Butterfly.
Why do you think the mainstream media hasn't reported much on Bill Clinton and Epstein?
You know, Juliet was, she was interviewed for The House of Maxwell, which is a BBC documentary. When she said that she met Bill Clinton and Epstein at the same time, Bill Clinton's name was axed out of that, out of their interview. When she asked the producers of the show, why did you take Bill Clinton's name out? They said it detracted from the emotional impact of her story. So I suppose that he is being protected.
In your research, did you only find that it was Bill Clinton visiting Jeffrey, or did Hillary ever attend?
I have no proof of Hillary attending, no. Just Bill. I didn't see her name on the flight logs.
What other big names came up through your research?
Well, on the final trip to New Mexico, Juliet was taken, along with another survivor, to meet with the then governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. His name also came up with Virginia Giuffre because she claimed that she was trafficked to him. Juliet said on this particular instance, when she was in New Mexico, 3 strange things happened. Firstly, Jeffrey Epstein did not abuse her on that trip, sexually abuse her. And for a man with his rapacious appetite, that was very unusual. Secondly, he took her into a room and he gave her what she described as a pelvic exam. He examined her in an almost medical way. Then he took her on this strange outing to, she believes it was the governor's mansion. where she met up with Bill Richardson, and she described somebody who would have been his right-hand man. Through my research, the name that comes up is David Coltrano, but I cannot be sure. They were told to sit outside. The men came out and met her and another survivor, looked at them for about 5 minutes. She didn't understand why they were there or why they were appraising them. Then Epstein went back into the office, had about a 5-minute or 10-minute conversation meeting with these men, came out and took them home. So Juliet is saying, why were we there? That is the same trip that she had this awful experience waking up in a lab, which she can describe to this day with great detail. There was a female doctor with long dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She had flawless skin. When Juliet woke up, this female doctor noticed she had gained consciousness and reassured her, said everything's going to be okay. She moved back down towards Juliet's abdomen. Juliet said she could feel the pressure of her touch. She was doing something down there, but she couldn't feel any pain. She was paralyzed. So she was obviously under some form of anesthesia. Afterwards, Juliet had a scar, a small circular scar, 2 inches above her pubic bone. And after that trip to New Mexico, it was slightly red and inflamed. So Juliet believes that her eggs were being harvested.